Well, a few hours ago, Israel launched an extraordinarily effective raid on Iranian not only nuclear facilities but also their chain of command, a decapitation effect. And this success will further push back the Iranians in their ability to respond. But I've learned from 20 plus years of covering conflicts in the Middle East, going in and out, is that you also have to think about the day after. And in the day after, we have to, I think, recognize that the Iranians will mount some type of retaliatory action. They've been diminished significantly over the last several months, first by the Israeli attacks on Hezbollah, their proxy in Lebanon. Second, the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria. So they are weakened, but I think they will feel now compelled to initiate actions in the Gulf. Some of them might be initially by their proxies all over the region, but eventually they'll come back. It's important, I think, to stress the need to prevent, if at all possible, through diplomatic means. The other aspect of the attack is President Trump tried, I think, very vigorously over 3 weeks to dissuade the Israelis, and he couldn't do that. We're presently conducting, in fact, we have scheduled a negotiation with them on their nuclear weapons. That's probably going to be scuttled. But this probably sends an alternate message too, which is that the geopolitical power of the United States has been diminished since we can't effectively communicate and convince our allies, our staunchest ally. One thing that remains constant, though, is that we have and always will have a obligation to protect the safety and security of Israel. And that's something that is not going to be at all questioned by anyone. But what we're really talking about here now is what do we do going forward? And the president himself has talked about more diplomacy, that the Iranians should recognize their vulnerabilities, etc. But I think given the traumatic attack, that they will continue, in fact, not only continue, that they will seek any means possible to threaten U.S. forces in the region. As you know, we ordered our withdrawal of non-essential military and diplomatic personnel from Iraq. And Iraq is one likely place that Iran would strike. There's a large Shia population. There have been Shia militia in Iraq for a long, long time. That's one of the area of concern. Another area of concern is Jordan. They have been under tremendous pressure. King Abdullah, because roughly 60% of the population are Palestinians, and the reaction by the Jordanian Palestinians to what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank has been very critical of that, those activities, and also to a degree the king. So we are in a very difficult situation. We have to recognize that this was an extremely effective tactical success by the Israeli forces that is further weakened Iran, but we also have to prepare for likely retaliation throughout the region and perhaps the world. And then we have to hopefully get back to some type of diplomatic approach, because the drive for nuclear weapons, I think, by the Iranians might ironically even be accelerated because of this attack. And on the other side, too, is that a diplomatic solution, I think, would be a way in which we could reduce tensions throughout the entire region. I regret that the arrangement that we had under President Obama was cast aside by the Trump administration, because frankly I think we'd be in a much better position vis-a-vis the aspirations of the Iranians for nuclear weapons now if they were still subject to that agreement. But again, a difficult situation. I've been in and out of the Middle East, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and parts north, south, east, and west for 20 years. And what I will return to is saying that this great success has to be followed up with diplomacy and with a conscious effort to lower violence in the region, not accelerate it. Let me stop.
Just to be clear, you're calling it a success, but also recognize the potential ramifications. Do you support what Israel did?
Well, I think I would have preferred, as well as President Trump, to delay it. I mean, there might be a more critical point down the road, particularly since we had negotiations scheduled for this weekend, I believe, and to ignore our negotiations, ignore the request by the Trump administration, the president personally, to just wait, suggests that that would have been a better course. And I think they would have had much more political credibility and clout if we essentially were able to demonstrate that the Iranians are not interested in a deal, that they're interested in just getting weapons.
So, like to your point, the operation was essentially a highly effective decapitation of their nuclear arm in Iran. But to your point, you mentioned of just that this could accelerate Iran's desires to build its nuclear power. I guess too, when I look at what Trump is saying today on Truth Social, his comment almost kind of makes it seem like he feels Iran is kind of cornered to get into a nuclear deal. It seems like you're not exactly agreeing with that metric. Knowing that a massive amount of their nuclear power has just kind of been wiped out in the last 24 hours, how do you see them being able to build back up here?
Well, I think their first response will not be immediately reconstituting the physical structures they had for their nuclear program. For one, that's expensive and long term. I think what they're going to look for, and they might find some spontaneous reaction, is their proxies throughout the region to mobilize them and to conduct attacks against targets that they consider to be their opponents. That's one reason why we scaled down dramatically our presence in Iraq, because I think, and I applaud the president for anticipating the possible reaction. And then I think over time, they will continue to try to build up these terrorist attacks, and it could be stretched even beyond the Middle East, just as a sort of an indication that they're not giving up, that they're responding to this attack. Again, the president, I think, was right to try to pursue a delay, at least, if not a complete postponement of this attack.
What is your concern level of a wider conflict? That's always really the concern when Israel strikes at someone or someone strikes at them, that other countries are going to get dragged in. Are you concerned that could happen here?
Well, I think I am concerned because, having spent a great deal of time in and out of Iraq, there is a large Shia population, like the Iranians, Shia. They are sympathetic to Tehran. They have organized military forces, and there is a constant sort of political tension in Iraq between Shia and Sunnis. We've done a very good job over the last several years of working with the Iraqi government, but we're basically downsizing, pulling out for our own protection, and I think that could be one place. Again, as I mentioned, the very, very sensitive situation in Jordan with the Palestinians, and then the work that we were trying to do, and particularly President Trump's last trip to the region, where to bring the Saudis, the Qataris, everyone in under one umbrella with the Israelis, we hope. Saudi Arabia condemned this attack, so they're in a position now where there can't be, I think, at least for the moment, as supportive of a convergence of all countries.
You mentioned before, right, unequivocal support for defending Israel. With the war in Gaza and the civilian casualties, and now, as you say, they kind of went rogue on this one and not listening to the international community of the United States. At what point with all this does support for Israel wane in your mind? At what point do you question, what are we doing here?
I think, frankly, and you're seeing it, a lot of people, not only Americans who are somewhat disinterested, but also within the Jewish community in the United States, is this the right strategy? Former Prime Minister Olmert has been very clear about his criticism of operations in Gaza and his commitment to a two-state solution, which has been the American policy for many years, although I think we're walking back here. But I think, again, we don't and can't tolerate attacks that fundamentally destroy the state of Israel. We're committed to that. We must be committed to that. And then what we have to do is work with our Israeli allies to address a number of problems. One is how do we stabilize Gaza in a way that we're not seeing food disruption, we're not seeing civilian casualties, etc. What do we do in the East Bank? Are we still committed to a two-state solution? That's now very vague in the administration. That I think is important too. But this is I think an obligation that we've taken on and we can't abandon.
Is it the greatest leverage we have with Israel, the arms that we supply them, with which they use them to do these things? And if we were to start talking about withholding those, I mean, maybe Netanyahu wouldn't have launched that attack. Maybe he wouldn't be as severe in Gaza. And to what extent does America bear some of that responsibility?
Well, I think first we have to understand that there's multiple issues in this region. This is the most complex area, or one of them in the world. One of the reasons, and I thought it was very appropriate, is in order to stabilize the region, supplying Israel and making them less vulnerable, or we would hope invulnerable to attack, would help stability. No one would be tempted, the Iranians or others, to attack Israel. I think now we're still committed to the defense, and I'm hoping that the president, because inherently he has that power, can use all of these means of persuasion to limit attacks within the region and to try to, again, see if there is a diplomatic path to a solution, not only for the Iranian nuclear problem, but also, as we mentioned before, the West Bank and Gaza, so that the government of Israel is secure, and we have some progress on human rights for everyone in the region.
I want to just note something that we just saw from CNN, just saying that Israel has identified incoming missiles launched from Iran. So it looks like we're seeing some form of a retaliation attack. They're asking people to take shelter at this moment.
No, the Iranians now will begin to, I think, as I said, retaliate. The first things they'll do is what they've done. They launched drones yesterday, which were intercepted by Israeli forces. Now they're sending missiles in, and they'll continue to do that. Then I think, as I said previously too, that will, I'm sure, beginning to coordinate with their proxy forces all over the region to see if they can mount, attacks against targets that they feel are appropriate. So we're now in a situation of trying to see, as I said, what does the day after look like? Is it full of terrorist attacks throughout the region and the world? Missile attacks by Iran against Israel? I think there is a probability of that. And all these things, again, have to be thought out before you conduct the attack. And my sense is that the United States was, not my sense, it was quite clear, was trying to persuade the Israelis to wait. And for many reasons. One is the aftermath they anticipated. Two, this attempt to have a diplomatic solution. It might not be the most viable one, but at least let's give it some time.
Turning to actual tomorrow, are you going to a No Kings rally?
Yes, I
protest?
am.
Just tell me why you wanted to take part in that.
Well, I think one thing you want to do is there's a lot of popular concern about the big, beautiful budget and its effects on the people of Rhode Island. If Medicaid is cut this severely, we're going to see a lot of people lose their coverage. In fact, I think we'll see premiums go up dramatically for everybody. So no one's going to escape that kind of damage. We're going to have cuts to education. It's going to impose incredible pressure on the state and local community and ultimately individuals, and probably not the best off individuals, the lower, working people who are struggling. Then I think there's also this use of the military as a political force, not as a military force, and I am strongly opposed to that. The trip to Fort Bragg, where they pre-selected the right people to stage the background, selling MAGA hats on a military post, which are a political decal. That's illegal, actually. All these things together is, we cannot allow our military to be politicized. Their duty is to the Constitution, not to a president. And his speech at West Point, his speech at Memorial Day, his speech at Fort Bragg, is that the military is sort of props for his productions.
Well, speaking of which, tomorrow, what do you think of the parade tomorrow for your Army's 250th birthday?
I think
coinciding with his birthday.
Again, I think it's going to be it's been taken over by the president for his gratification and not saluting the Army. I had the privilege of serving an active duty for 12 years and commanding paratroopers, greatest privilege of my life. And this, I'm afraid, is going to be more about the president's birthday than about the birthday of the United States Army. And it's not appropriate. I think I don't think those brave men and women, mostly men, who went ashore on D-Day did it for tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. I think they did it to give kids and struggling families a chance. Unfortunately, that's not what I believe the president is in favor of.
Meanwhile, we have troops in California still. What is your sense of what's going on there?
Well, the troops in California, I think, are, one, unnecessary, two, illegal. The governor objected, the mayor objected. There was not any type of rebellion or insurrection that would require National Guard forces to be federalized. The chief of police objected to it also. He felt he could control and protect the ICE. I will point out there's no excuse for burning vehicles and throwing stones at law enforcement officers. That's wrong. But I think that could have been contained by the local authorities. And what the president is, I believe, trying to set is a precedent that he can send not only National Guardsmen, but the United States Marines or regular Army into any city in America to enforce his will. And that is very dangerous. The district court ruled it to be illegal. It's at the circuit court. The courts will have a voice in it. But I think the American people have to understand that the Army was not constructed to enforce the criminal laws of the United States or any locality, and the Navy, etc. They're there to protect us from foreign threats, and in the case of a true rebellion, to protect the Union which they did in the Civil War. So it's just very troubling. And I think my colleague, Senator Padilla, as you probably know, he was in the building to have a briefing from the Northcom commander, etc. When he found out there was a press conference, he was escorted to the conference by an FBI agent and another representative. He identified himself as a United States Senator, and when he tried to speak and a counterpoint to what the Kristi Noem said, he was grabbed and hustled out of the room, and completely inappropriate.
The counterpoint to that, what do you think to the counterpoint that he was trying to stage a political stunt by trying to interrupt the secretary's press conference, and they claim they didn't know who he was?
That claim is completely, I think, erroneous. He was escorted into the room by an FBI agent and other federal authorities. He was there not to disrupt Kristi Noem, but to receive a briefing from the Northcom commander, the Army commander in charge of the operation overall. He was in a federal building. I'd like to think that United States senators can go into federal briefings and federal buildings and get briefings from military officers, Northcom. He was led in by an FBI agent who apparently identified the senator to all the security people. So this notion of that he was some crazy person they didn't recognize who was coming in to disrupt, no. I think he was going to ask for a question or make a counterpoint. And frankly, we're an equal branch of government. I think the executive should listen at least to our questions and try to respond.
A different counterpoint might be that we've been seeing ICE and law enforcement throughout the United States violating people's civil rights all the time, right? Sending them to Ecuador or whatever. So why should a senator be immune to that? I mean, you are a citizen after all, and so are you saying you have greater rights to?
No. I would say, in fact, if they would do that before cameras for a United States senator, then what are they doing outside of the camera view to ordinary citizens or people with a legal status here in the United States?
Right.
Yeah, that's, again, I can't, why are these ICE people showing up with masks on?
Right.
I mean, I always thought police officers and law enforcement officers in the United States, they showed their face, people knew who they were responsible.
Right.
I don't know if they have cameras on them, but now most police departments do. I don't think so. And in fact, we've criticized them continuously because they've used military flights to evacuate immigrants or illegal aliens technically, and I've commented to the Air Force because they've had Air Force personnel remove their name tags, which is against the rules. You have to have an identifiable name tag on it, and so they're cutting corners left and right, and I think what they're trying to do is drive down the barriers between a military force and a political adjunct to the White House to the point where there's no difference, and there has to be a difference.
So last week, ICE, the head of ICE came in after a news conference about Operation Patriot, and basically said the reason for wearing the masks was because these people are being doxxed. Their information is being put online across the internet, and their family's information is being put online and threatened. What do you think about that argument?
Well, I think if that's the case, then they can pursue it other ways, i.e. investigate who is doing this and try to get a warrant and arrest the person who's spreading this information if it's illegal information. But it just goes to the whole point about what we consider to be law enforcement in the United States. I mean, I think we'd all be a little surprised if local police officers started showing up wearing masks and with no name tags and things like that. And I think the federal law enforcement agents have the same responsibility. They're professional. And if, by the way, I think it would help them conduct themselves in a much more professional way. You see pictures of Senator Padilla on the floor. being handcuffed when he was saying, I'm a United States Senator and I'll cooperate. It's this whole new notion of, we want to send an image of three big burly ICE people going ahead and tackling someone and put them on the ground, etc. Again, I think it's part of the demonstration and the theatricality of what President Trump made his name on, reality TV.
We've seen with police departments in Massachusetts, they have a state law that prevents police officers from working with ICE. In Rhode Island, a number of police departments kind of have policies, not necessarily saying they won't coordinate with ICE, but for example, for like the flock safety cameras that are out there, they won't share that information with immigration enforcement. Do you think that having a police presence at some of the, and specifically police are saying, like Warwick Police Chief, he had said that if that the department does not get involved if a crime has not been committed necessarily, specifying between someone being deported versus someone who's like charged with a significant crime. But do you think that police should be maybe pivoting in these situations and coordinating more with ICE to let people know that they're...
Well, first, these are federal laws that are being enforced by federal agents. Second, it's highly unusual, in my experience, for a local police department to invite the federal officers to come in and help them do their local jobs. And in fact, when that's the case, it's usually a cooperative agreement between the federal government and involving probably a federal crime as well as a state crime. So there are legal issues here. I think cooperation, thoughtful cooperation on both sides would be helpful. But that would, I think, on one side require, do you have a warrant for the arrest of this person? No, well, how can you arrest them? We're seeing such cavalier treatment of due process by federal authorities that local police officers, I think, are somewhat concerned that they would be involved in what is illegal activities.
And local police would not be asked, so they would be,
I hope.
if there were a danger that they're talking about,
Yeah,
that would be part
I
of it.
mean, they're more local, but again, my view is that if you're fairly enforcing the laws, following due process, that you should be doing that without disguises on. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's in there.